If you suddenly wake up and realize you're trapped alone in a building with an alien from outer space, what would you do? You have to move as quietly as you can, of course, find your childhood friend, and find a way to leave without letting the alien know. Today I'm going to break down the mistakes made, what you should do, and how to beat the alien in Lockdown Level X. This beautiful young lady is going to die. Ryoka here is trapped alone in a building because she overslept. As she wakes up, she gets a text from mom. When she answers, her mother tells her to calm down, and then she explains that while Ryoka was sleeping, their building had been put on lockdown. Kind of like the pandemic, but all over again, except this time it's more deadly. Before explaining, her mom warns her to not leave her room for any reason. Ryoka isn't sold, but she decides to obey her mom first. She abandons the door and heads for the window instead, but her mom immediately sends another message that she's not allowed to open the window either. By now, Ryoka is very worried and frustrated. I mean, hey, I would be too. Her mom then gives her 3 rules. 1, don't leave the room. 2, don't turn on the lights. And 3, absolutely don't make any noise. At this point, Ryoka can't take it anymore, but that's when her mom finally breaks the news to her. There's a monster on the roof, an alien from outer space, or a creature from under the water. They don't know. The government calls it X because they don't know what the F it is. And that makes sense because X is the value of the unknown, isn't it? Her mother and the rest of her family have been moved far away, and with everyone else in the building, she's the only one left, all alone because she decided to take a nap. And just as good old mom finishes explaining, her alarm clock goes off. But as soon as that goes off, the building starts shaking, and her mom tells her that was no earthquake. Ryoka realizes that it must have been X that shook the building. Ryoka's breath begins to shake as she starts texting her mom repeatedly, but mommy isn't answering, and that's when it hits her. She's all alone in the building with X as her only companion. Okay, the only reason she's stuck here is because of one thing. She slept while her family was out. From the beginning of any horror story ever, everyone knows that the bad stuff happens when you're alone. So if I were Ryoka, I would have followed my family out. I know she's tired, she probably worked really hard, but it's better to be tired than alive than rested and dead. So easy choice, go out with the fam and live. But let's say she doesn't head out. She still doesn't have to get quarantined, so she got home because she studied all night. But what if, say, she had a test that she had to do when she got home? Would she have slept? Nope. She would have had some coffee to keep her awake, something, same principle, different story. So now that she's tired but alone, what I do is just whip some coffee and get to waiting. If I'm awake and waiting for them to get back, I'd see my mom's call when it comes in. I would also hear the sound of people freaking evacuating from the building. And if you hear them, you follow them. And then it's goodbye X and hello normal life in a city a few miles away. But you know, there's something that's bugging me. Why did X quarantine itself to one building? I mean, if it reacts to sound, then shouldn't have heard the sound of panic people trying to leave, right? I mean, it's probably scary, right? Wouldn't you think so? Why didn't it go after them? I would have heard it chasing them away. Anyway, I'd be alive and safe, and that's all that matters. With all the luck of a 4-leaf clover, Ryoka learns that someone else is still in the building. This guy heard her childhood classmate named Shuhei. Her mom tells her to call him. When she does, he confirms that he's still in the building. While they're talking, she sees a giant worm-like shadow by her window, although her mom told her not to. Ryoka pulls out her inner Gen Z and decides to see for herself. She opens the curtain just enough to peek through, and that's when she sees it. A giant tentacle that crushes a hawk with a single squeeze. Shuhei tries to calm her down. He tells her that his dad works with the special police and they would come and save them soon. But Ryoka's too smart for that, and Ryoka points out they're in lockdown. No one is coming to save them. Shuhei decides that it's better for them to be together since they're all alone in the building. But then Ryoka's mom calls again and brings more bad news. X can control humans. She explains what the police told her. X has some eggs on its back, and it needs human blood to birth them, so it eats humans. And she warns her to not open the door to Shuhei because he's compromised. X also shoots out spores from a flower, and whoever breathes in the spores falls under its control. While Ryoka is talking to her mom, Shuhei informs her by text that he's leaving his room. Her mommy warns her again that anyone under X's control will try to drag her out of the room, and just then Shuhei starts knocking on the door. Mommy tells her not to open it, but Ryoka realizes she forgot to lock the door. Shuhei opens the door, and they have a small tussle, and it all gets very messy. But when she grabs a knife to protect herself from Shuhei and the mind control, X bursts into her room through a window. I would have stopped X from coming if I were Ryoka, with some basic mind control lifting no jutsu. Here's how. X bursts into the room through the window because it hears the sound of their squabble. It is sensitive to sound, so the easiest way to make sure it doesn't notice their presence is to not make any sound. Pretty obvious, really. And for this, the responsibility lies with Ryoka. She's doing a lot of things with no verification. So her mom says the only person in the building with her is likely controlled by X, and without confirmation, she tries to kill him. Yeah, I get there's fight or flight, but that's why she's weak. If it were me, I would introduce option C. Cure the mind control. How? Ryoka and Shuhei have a history as classmates, and that's all the advantage I need. Just like a lie detector, mind control needs a certain mindset to operate successfully. If Shuhei really is under mind control, then the goal should not be to get rid of him, but to free him, because he may very well be my ticket out of there. With their history as classmates and friends, all Ryoka needed was to do something out of the ordinary that would shock the mind control out of Shuhei's system. My recommendations? Well, I mean, she could have jumped on him and given him a little smooch as soon as he enters the room, or she could strip down to a whole lot of nothing and just wait for him to open the door, or just do a good old Batman karate chop. Hopefully she hits him hard enough to give him a cognitive recalibration. Then once he's awake or jolted from the shock of what he sees first, he'd be back to normal, and this is without any arguing or noise, so X wouldn't even know what happened. And Shuhei pulls her to himself and protects her from X before telling her to run. Ryoka and Shuhei run away, but the monster continues to follow them. Luckily, they jump before the head of the monster can get them. After it stops chasing, they head outside. Ryoka realizes Shuhei is not brainwashed. She tells him her mom's theory, but it makes him develop his own. What if their parents are the ones that have been brainwashed? Shuhei thinks it's possible, but decides that it's best for them to leave X's range first. As they walk, the fog gets thicker. Then Ryoka feels lightheaded. She falls to the ground, and Shuhei tries to catch her, and you realize that, oh, he's a little lightheaded too. And they're picked up by the special police and taken to the creature. And this proves Shuhei's theory's right, except it's too late for him. When Ryoka wakes up, she realizes they've been captured. Yeah, no shit. She can see Shuhei tied up by X, but as soon as she starts to scream at him to wake up, X makes its move and eats up Shuhei, and without giving her a moment to grieve, it eats her too. Okay, no. This is totally avoidable. If we go over what we know about X, they should have expected what would happen. We got two people, Ryoka and Shuhei. They both already came to the conclusion that the special police were working for X, and they already knew that X had the ability to brainwash people by releasing spores into the atmosphere. But when they came out of the house, they didn't account for any of this. If I were in their shoes, I would start by getting a countermeasure against these brainwashing spores. Given the circumstances, there's not much we can do because we're on the run, and we don't know how small these spores are or if they're as small as a virus. So I would cover my nose and mouth with some sort of fabric that I have on me. You can even use some of your clothes to cover your nose and mouth. People do it all the time to stop inhaling smoke from a burning building, and clothes can reduce the rate of inhaling negative toxins from the air. And depending on the size of these spores, it very well could help us avoid falling under the spore's control. Now, as for the special police, they didn't show up till the kids fell, so wouldn't it be safe to assume that if the kids don't fall, they won't come out? But in the event they do, we'd still be awake, so we could have probably tried to, I don't know, run? Or simply try to go into hidden areas where we won't be easily spotted. You see, my friends, it all could have been avoided if they just kept their head on a swivel. Ryoka's eyes pop open, and she realizes she's been dreaming. Her hands are quivering. But before she can make sense of her dream, Mom calls, and get this, she tells her the exact same thing as in her dream. But this time, X is a little different. Instead of a monster with tentacles, X is a tall monster with 2 legs. What's going on? Ryoka's mom gives her very similar rules again, but this time she adds that she has to stay hidden from X, as it is walking all over the building. And you know what that means. If it finds her, it's going to kill her, and this time, she has to leave her room now, like yesterday. But Ryoka takes a moment to weigh her options, and she quickly decides that she can trust her mom this time, unlike in the dream, where there are no spores this time. So mommy isn't under any brainwashing, right? She calls Shuhei, and he's still in the building, and she tells him her dream to him, and our boy proves that he's a real gamer. He tells her that her dream and what they've been going through reminds him of time loop games. He has no idea how right he is. They decide to link up, but this time it's her turn to go to his room. Ryoka heads out of her room and slowly walks down the stairs. As she passes each flight of stairs, she can hear her heart racing, and it pounds so loud that she thinks X can hear it, and maybe he does. Because as soon as she turns to the 4th floor, she meets him face to face. Ryoka says her prayers and gets ready to meet her maker. It's a really intense staring contest. But then X does something weird. While Ryoka's holding her breath and everything holdable, he looks at her like she's irrelevant and walks away. He just ups and leaves. Ryoka finally breathes and watches X go before she turns in the direction of Shuhei's room. But then she runs into Shuhei. He got worried and came looking for her. While they're talking, X shows up and starts smashing stuff, and they decide the only way out is the elevator. As soon as Ryoka tells him that X found her but didn't hurt her, he figures it out. X is blind. It sees by sound. So there's one thing they've been missing through all this anime. This monster sees by sound, right? Well, that's how we're gonna beat it. Every sound-sensitive movie in history, from Quiet Place to Don't Breathe, tells us one thing about our sound Jedi, these guys react to any sound. But that is what their problem is. Think about it, if they react to any sound, then increasing the sound means increasing their discomfort. The average human voice produces 60 to 70 decibels when speaking normally. When shouting, it rises up to around 75 decibels. Now what you need to understand is that these creatures react to sound because it makes them uncomfortable, to the point if it gets loud enough, it could hurt them. That's why they destroy everything that makes a sound within their radius. Now knowing this, we already know how to beat it. Make noise. I know it sounds like crappy advice, but hear me out. If 60 to 70 decibels makes X uncomfortable, imagine how much damage 100 to 200 decibels could do. It would literally make it go crazy, especially if the sounds are coming from different areas. My plan's pretty simple. Get Shuhei to gather all the alarm clocks in level 4 where his house is, and I'd gather all the alarm clocks in level 9 where my house is. Then before leaving the elevator, I'd set a time for them. Imagine 24 alarm clocks going off in different parts of the building at the same time. X won't know what hit him, and before he'd be able to turn them all off or destroy them all, two things would happen. One, he could very well die from sound exposure, and two, we'd be out of the building for good. And that's how you beat such a silly sound-sensitive monster. It's easy. The creature draws closer to them, but Shuhei bets his phone on his belief that it's blind. He turns on his alarm and throws it in a different direction. Jackpot, it works. The creature chases after the phone, and that gives them enough time to run. They rush to the elevator to try to get away, but the elevator takes too long to arrive, and it makes a lot of noise. And the creature charges after them as the doors close. They let out a big sigh of relief, but that's when the creature tears open the elevator doors and grabs Shuhei with its claws. Ryoka tries to fight it off and they do a bit of tug of war, but then, like every great stud before him, Shuhei decides to look death in the eyes, and he takes the fight by the cojones and says goodbye to Ryoka, but then he just gets dead in a few seconds. Yeah, I know, very underwhelming. You think Ryoka would honor his sacrifice and keep her mouth shut, but nope, she starts screaming like a little girl because she is one. The creature hears her scream and crashes the elevator, and yep, it kills her too, but not before she notices a strange button on the elevator icons. Seriously? Shuhei dying here is understandable, but Ryoka's death was unnecessary. But if I had to, here's how I would save them both. Shuhei already showed us that it was possible to survive X by tricking it. What's a good trick if you can't do it twice? We already know that X can't see. It relies on sound to move, but they already realized that using the elevator will cause a lot of noise. So if you have to use the elevator, why don't you prepare for what is going to happen? If I were in their shoes, as soon as we get to the elevator, I'm gonna tell Ryoka to get her phone ready, because that's gonna be another distraction as soon as X arrives. Once it shows up, I give the phone to Shuhei to toss it as far as he can, and once he does that, X is bound to chase after it, giving us some time to get away. But if for whatever reason it doesn't work, you got the second phone to toss, and toss it in a different direction to distract it again. And just like that, we get away for a second time. But in the off chance that we don't think of that in time, and Shuhei does the noble guy thing and sacrifices himself for Ryoka, I shouldn't let the sacrifice go to waste. There's no reason for me, Ryoka, to die. If I were in her shoes, here's what I'd do. I'd shut up. You think I'm joking? Think about it. If she don't scream, Shuhei's death actually means something, and X would not have known where in the elevator she was. He could have gone somewhere else. Or what if Ryoka kept her phone and waited for X to move in just the right way to give her an opening, and she tossed the phone out of the elevator? It would have made a sound and would have given her time to escape. He would have gone somewhere else to follow the sound if she just shut up. As soon as she dies, her eyes pop open again, and yes, she's back in her room. The time is the same, and her mother is calling again. She gives her the same rules and tells her to escape the building. When she calls Shuhei, he tells her they are definitely in a horror game, and he figures out their task: escape the monster while getting clues to clear the level. While they talk, Ryoka remembers that she saw a 31st floor on the elevator. She knows the building is 30 stories, so they believe this is their first clue. So they meet up, and Ryoka recounts all that she knows about Shuhei. She tells them that she has got a trap prepared to help them get on the elevator without alerting X. They walk into X as they get into the corridor, and for the first time in the history of anime, instead of Tokno Jutsu, they use an actual shinobi move by just shutting the F up. X ignores them, and the clock hits, and Ryoka's plan starts. She had set her alarm clock for that specific time. The alarm starts blaring through the building, and just as expected, X goes after the sound. He breaks the wall with a simple jump, and they use that opportunity to get to the elevator. And Ryoka was right, there is a 31st floor on the elevator, and they punch it in and start heading up. As they get close, they start talking normally because all's well. But then X reacts and tears through the elevator to get them. And this time, Ryoka isn't taking death for an answer. She puts on some music from her phone and throws the phone into the Cyclops-like eye hole, and as she suspected, the creature screams screams and tries to get the phone out. Whilst distracted, she climbs out of the elevator and tells Shuhei to follow her to the 31st floor. They climb up the elevator wires, and somehow throughout this PTSD-filled experience, reminisce on their childhood days. Shuhei says that she's gotten a lot stronger since her childhood days. They finally reach the top. Shuhei pauses because of how bright the 31st floor is. And X, the persistent little shit, shows up behind him again. And Ryoka is determined to protect Shuhei this time, so she runs and kicks X back down the elevator line. Shuhei uses the opportunity to climb into the 31st floor, and X uses the wall to propel itself back up. But as soon as it gets to the 31st floor, poof, it's gone. And they take a moment to rest and then begin exploring the vast white 31st floor. And they walk until they see a green notebook on the floor. Inside it are drawings for the X game, drawn by someone in kindergarten. They find the 2 levels they have passed, drawn in the book, but there's also a level 3 with a boy and a girl, but no monster. As soon as they see it, the floor gives way and they fall. Ryoka opens her eyes and she's back to the same starting point again. This time, however, she's not afraid, and she decides to go forward until she fully solves the mystery of X. Her mom calls her as usual to give her the details about the new X, but Ryoka is convinced she will break the loop. If you were Ryoka, how would you break out of this loop? Let me know down in the comments.